Oblivion is the black sheep in the Elder Scrolls franchise. It came out at an odd time when gameplay and graphics were being streamlined in order to appeal to a broader audience, but the game was still trying to maintain old fantasy game elements like stats and classes. It does neither of these exceptionally well, but it's still a good game in its own right. Which is why today I'm going to be going over all the reasons you should and shouldn't play Oblivion. The most apparent thing a new player will notice is Oblivion's janky animations. Just look at this jump. There is no startup, you just go straight in the air and begin the fall. Walking animations look strange as well, again from no real startup animations. Also, 360 spinning exists in the game and it looks incredibly odd. Now, a lot of this was because people didn't really understand how to fully map animations, and they weren't necessarily focused on smoothing out animations. Now, I won't be talking about the graphics because I believe it is unfair. Developers didn't fully understand the limitations of the hardware, and graphics will always be getting better and better, and for a decade-year-old game, it still looks relatively fine. Dungeons are poorly designed, and I feel that there are a few reasons for this. One, from my understanding, Bethesda's team that worked on the dungeon maps was a relatively small one. Instead of having multiple new assets to use, they often used a copy-paste feature, which is probably why most of the dungeons feel very samey. On top of this, with very few exceptions, most of the maps in the vanilla version of Oblivion don't offer a ending into beginning loop. What I mean is that when you go through a full dungeon, at the end of it, you're going to have to backtrack through everything you've already scavenged and explored in order to get out of the dungeon. There are a few exceptions of this, one including the one right outside the prison when you first start the game, and a couple other story dungeons, but for the most part, you're going to have to completely backtrack. Enemies are quite samey in dungeons, and it's not uncommon to come across 6 rats or 6 goblins as the only enemy inside of a dungeon. But by far, Oblivion's biggest issue is its leveling system and its enemy scaling. Enemies will go through a sort of leveling up. An example of this would be wolves that can be found in forests will only exist from levels 1 to 5 and will be upgraded to timber wolves and boars from levels 6 to 12. These enemies sort of act as difficulty spikes when hitting these associated levels. The enemies scale rapidly in difficulty, especially the Daedra and dungeon monsters, and it can be very hard to keep up. The game uses a leveling system in which you pick 7 major skills. If you level up 10 times within those 7 major skills, then the next time you rest, your character will advance 1 level and can raise attribute stats. Now, these stats will only grow depending on what skills you use, so things like Blade and Blunt will upgrade strength, and Acrobatics and Athletics will upgrade speed. So depending on how many times you upgrade these skills, you'll have more stat attributes when you level up. Let me slow down and give you a quick example. Let's say you wanted to play a mage, so naturally for your 7 major skills, you pick Restoration, Destruction, and Alteration as 3 of them. Naturally, you use those skills a lot, and so you level up very quickly. The problem arises when Intelligence, which is the main stat you're going to be wanting to go as for a mage, now can only be upgraded by 3 attribute points instead of 5, and this is because your major skills were the ones associated with Intelligence. The easy solution would be to pick major skills that you don't necessarily plan on using so you aren't leveling up too fast. But this also means that you have to go out of your way to gain another 10 levels in a skill you don't necessarily want to use. You also have to be able to keep track of every level to make sure that you're getting the maximum stat attributes. I often found myself using a spreadsheet to keep track of my levels, which isn't a good thing in my opinion. One last tidbit is you have to level endurance as fast as possible when you begin a new game, since HP is added every level based on your current endurance stat. You have to make sure you level block, armor, and heavy armor 10 times every level to hit that 100 cap as soon as possible. If you don't, then you shouldn't be surprised when at level 16 most of the monsters begin to one-shot you because your HP is so low. Now, another solution to this problem is to lower the difficulty, but this feels like a cop-out and the game should have been designed with a much smoother experience in mind. Oblivion's leveling system is an absolute mess, and I recommend you download a leveling fix mod if you plan on playing on PC or Xbox One. Now, I know I just spent a long time talking about why I dislike the leveling system, but I'm going to argue that levels and stats in general are still a good idea, and I hope they come back in the next game. Stats are inherently fun. Having a high speed and moving incredibly fast is goofy and useful at the same time. Having a high acrobat skill stat and jumping on roofs is goofy and feels like a proper reward for being so strong. One-shotting enemies with your insane spell that costs all your mana feels good because you work so hard to reach that intelligence stat. Stats may break games, but I would argue they provide more fun and work as rewards for hard work. In Skyrim, every character feels samey, but inventing your own class in Oblivion gives you a role and gives you the freedom of choice. In Skyrim, you need perk points to make your skills better, so at higher levels it takes forever to get good at a new skill. But in Oblivion, all you have to do is start using that skill. Everything is far more accessible than in Skyrim. And Oblivion is also the only game that has its own customizable spells. In Skyrim, you have a preset amount of spells, and while spell types feel very unique, you can't invent new ones. Do you want to play as a mage support? Then conjure summons and buff them with fortifying stats. Do you want to slow people down and deal lightning damage? It's as easy as pie. Just make a lightning spell and make a sap effect where you either sap speed or athletics. Oblivion's magic system just allows for far more freedom than anything Skyrim or Morrowind has to offer. But let's get to Oblivion's main draw, which would be its writing and atmosphere. Oblivion's dialogue isn't the best, but the quests often take several twists and turns. An example would be Oblivion's rat quest in Anvil.
Yes, rats.
What seems as a run-of-the-mill kill some rats quest turns into a feud in which two angry neighbors were planting meat to kill the woman's pet rats by attracting mountain lions. In something like Skyrim or Morrowind, you would kill the threat and end the quest. You never know where an Oblivion quest will end up. Oblivion's other fantastic quality is its atmosphere. The game features relaxed music, beautiful scenery, and weather effects. Just take a quick look at this scene. This is just a normal camp. It's not special, yet it still is pretty damn gorgeous. One last thing is that Oblivion is full of these magical moments, I would describe them. Very few games do this otherworldly magic thing very well, but Oblivion is chock full of them, and they are just a joy to witness. Combat has its ups and downs. Swords, knives, and even two-handed weapons feel very samey. Skyrim's weapons feel more unique, but when slamming someone with a two-handed axe, I expect some feedback, which Skyrim does not do. Oblivion makes NPCs and enemies recoil, and it feels more realistic. Both games perform much better than Morrowind. I mean, just look at this combat. Honestly, you can take it or leave it when it comes to Oblivion's combat, but the parrying, blocking, and ultimately more realistic fighting I feel is much better than anything Skyrim and Morrowind has to offer. When it comes to Oblivion's graphic and audio work, it comes off as pretty goofy. I'm pretty sure most people have seen awkward NPC interactions, but in case you haven't, here's one I found while playing.
Oh. Hello. Do you know Aradul? I understand he has some unique skills. I've heard there's no one in the city better at opening locks. Farewell.
While I understand this is very immersion-breaking, I would argue this is what makes the game endearing. Even the odd NPC mannerisms, like guards knowing your exact location the moment you do something wrong. While this isn't good design, it's quirky and fun, and it's part of the reason I come back to this game. If I wanted a more realistic and gritty experience, I would have gone to Skyrim. One last note to touch on would be gold. Gold is kind of odd in this game. Merchants sell for a ton of gold on anything that's enchanted, but they also buy rare items for a lot, even if the enchantment's relatively small. So at the beginning of the game, it's hard to really buy anything worthwhile from the merchants, but the moment you start enchanting your own items, you can make a ton of cash and easily break the 1,000 gold mark. Oblivion, Skyrim, and Morrowind are all full of game-breaking glitches, so I would say save regularly. I at least save probably once every half an hour to hour, and don't entirely rely on the autosave, because if something horrible happens, then you're going to be really far behind and you're going to be stuck, and you might have wasted easily 24 hours of gameplay. If you enjoy Skyrim or Morrowind, I would recommend you give Oblivion a try, but be prepared for some jankiness. It's a good game with some pretty good writing and tons of exploration to be had. Part of its main draw would be its great atmosphere and its quirky nature in general. The game is available on Xbox 360, Xbox One, PS3, and PC. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I thank you for watching.